So this is a presentation that I originally made for my family after I was diagnosed with autism, because I had told them, but I could tell that they weren't really sure what that meant for me specifically. And in talking to some other people recently, we realized that this presentation kind of has some more general value than literally just, for my family. So I'm going to be hanging out down in this corner, and I'm going to walk you through this whole presentation. So we're going to define autism. We're also going to define masking, and then we're going to specifically discuss how these apply to me. Autism is generally characterized by differences or difficulties in 5 areas: interests and abilities, communication and socializing, sensory processing, behaviors, and routine. The last 2 seem really similar. They are distinct. We will make a distinction that will make that meaningful. Diagnostic language describes social and communication deficits as relating to the following. So if you have these kind of deficits, you're likely to have trouble in the area of social emotional reciprocity, nonverbal communication, or interpersonally in your relationships. Diagnostic language describes behavioral deficits as relating to the following: repetitive speech or actions, intense fixated interests, adherence to routine, and hyper or hyposensitivities. So we have deficits in the social and communication realm, and then deficits in the behavioral realm. These features also must meet the following requirements: present for all of life, they impair your work and social life, and they are not the result of intellectual disability. So for me, I have differences in all those areas that disrupt my life and which are not the result of intellectual disability. These features are downstream from my neurology. They are not emotional states or volitional. It's something happening at a deeper level than that in my body. Despite that, I was not diagnosed until April 2025. I was 35 years old. How does that happen? The answer is that I masked. So what masking is when an autistic person pretends to be allistic. They pretend to not have autism. And this is harmful to autistic people in a lot of ways. In practice, masking refers to 2 types of behaviors: either concealing your autistic traits or affecting allistic traits. So hiding the ways which you are kind of notably autistic, or very ostentatiously demonstrating how not autistic you are. When an autistic person conceals their traits, though, they are trying to emulate allistic people. And because autistic people have different needs, this often means that the autistic person is ignoring their own needs and doesn't address them, which causes harm through an absence of care, right? You're trying to emulate an allistic life, and you're not trying to accommodate yourself in that way, and you do end up harming yourself. As people like me attempt to mimic their allistic peers, they find their energy, mood, and social understanding cannot keep up. They try to push through sensory pain, try to stay awake longer, to stay out with everybody. Drugs and alcohol can help you stay present in those kind of situations, stay out later, stay with all your friends. Masking is sometimes a choice, but this is something that for me started in childhood. Why would a child understand I cannot let anybody know who I am, right? That's a response to social ridicule first, and that's the other way that this is harmful, right? So because masking is forced on us involuntarily first in childhood, right? And because it costs us the ability to see and respond to our own neurological needs, and because it doesn't treat our capacities any differently from allistic people. For all those reasons, having to mask is bad. Medically bad. It's bad for our bodies because we neglect ourselves and go through harmful experiences. It's also bad morally because we shouldn't have to conceal things that we didn't choose about ourselves in order to avoid social punishment. And that's really what we're talking about when we talk about masking. We're talking about a method by which you can avoid social punishment. And the method is to pretend you are not who you are. This is geared to my family, but if you have an autistic person in your life, and chances are you probably do, you might not know it, but you do. Assuming you do, it should be a priority to ensure that masking is not necessary around you. And this is something that's simple to implement. It's essentially a culture, and the culture says that autistic behaviors are okay, and autistic traits are okay. And so what I mean by that is that when we see an autistic behavior, we don't judge that and retaliate. And when we see autistic traits, we don't fight with them, debate them. They're not negotiable. So we'll get into some specific examples later, but just remember, autistic behaviors are okay, and autistic traits are okay. So understanding that an autistic family member or community member or colleague or whatever is communicating through their behavior. Understanding that they are using behavior to communicate will let you understand them. So, we'll get into the third part, which is how autism actually affects me personally. At the beginning, we talked about how autism describes differences in 5 areas: interests and abilities, communication and socializing, sensory processing, behaviors, and routine. We'll go through all of these for me. My special interests are the 5 things that we showed at the very beginning: Simpsons, X-Men, Magic, Gundam, and Dragon Ball. Those are the things that I love, and I love them with an intensity that other people tell me is extraordinary in the literal sense, beyond what is ordinary. There's something exceptional about how much I want to interface with these things and how much I want to explore them. When I talk about these special interests, I'm either trying to regulate myself in a difficult situation or I'm actually sharing something that I love to connect with you. These are the things that are actually the most important to me in life. And when I share them with you, that is an act of love. I would not share these things with an enemy. I have some talents, whatever word we want to use, but I'm pretty good at things that require memory, things that require you to use math and logic, really quite good at music, and I'm really good at a lot of kinds of abstract thought. But these are areas which I appear to also be something like extraordinary in the literal sense, just beyond what is the ordinary level of memory, mathematics, logic, musical comprehension, and abstract thought. These are things that I apparently excel in. When something relies on this range of cognitive skills, though, I should be trusted extraordinarily because of those skills that I have and because of how many times I've demonstrated that I actually have these skills. I am not guessing. I am not, right? And so what I found in life is that a lot of times when I would say, well, I remember this, someone else would just say, I don't remember that. And the way that this would be treated is, well, one person remembers and the other doesn't remember, and those cancel each other out, so no one knows. I know because I remember. But I just get treated like, no, you can't know that because I don't know that. But you don't have the same kind of memory that I do. So it makes sense that I would have access to some pieces of information that you might not, but this is met with combativeness. And they just say, no, you don't know things that I don't know, even if you have a way of knowing them. Fantastic. Conversely, those are the areas that I'm strong in, right? I do struggle with some physical orientation tasks. I could do big pages of multiplication problems years before I could tie shoes. And it's because when the term that I use for that is shoe tying felt geometrically confusing to me. Think about that term, geometrically confusing. So when you you start tying the shoelaces, and when you take the entire object and rotate the whole thing to continue, that's a difficult moment for me. And I need to actually stop and think about what shape it makes once it has turned. And other people are just flying through this moment and don't care. That's always been really difficult for me. My face doesn't emote too much. I used to fake it a lot. There was a day at work that I remember I went to lunch and my face hurt. It physically hurt from fake smiling for so long. And I said to myself, don't ever do that again. You don't come in this building and fake smile until you're in pain. And I resolved that I was going to be comfortable doing what I call flat face. And I was going to do flat face at work. Whatever the fucking consequence was, I'm not going to hurt my face for this. I also don't understand some facial expressions. And I understand, like, if you show me a picture of an angry man, I'll be like, yeah, angry man. But there's nothing that it feels like inside. You can come up in my face and fucking scream in my face like a lunatic, and I will just be like, no, the thing you said is incorrect for this reason, because it doesn't scare me. It doesn't cause adrenaline. There's nothing that happens inside when you, like, get in my face and scream. You're just closer to me, and now you're annoying. I do miss a lot of nonverbal elements of communication. But what that doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that I struggle with cognitive empathy. I understand why people are motivated to want the things that they want. They just communicate that in very roundabout and confusing ways. This is where special interests can come in. I do struggle sometimes with what the content or where the direction of a completely free-form conversation is supposed to go. And I will often reach for special interests in that time. It's an easy thing for me to reach into and provide insight or say, hey, that reminds me of the way that this thing works. And it's a tool bag that I can almost always reach into to keep the thing going. But I do have that sense of like, I could not tell you if we took a correct turn back there. I can tell you we're still driving on the road, where the car is still functioning. I don't know if that was correct, though. Hyperosmia is an interesting one, because when people say, I'm sensitive to smells, what they think is, I don't like that. I just don't like it. All right, but what I'm saying is that I'm sensitive to smells to the extent that they are not emotionally bothering me. They're dysregulating my nervous system by overstimulating it. And an example, I could imagine if you're at work. Everyone knows the example of microwaving fish at work, because that's the one time when you smell something strongly enough to be sickened by it. What if everything did that to you? And every time you said that, people just said, no, it isn't. No, it doesn't. Because that's what my life was like, right? It was, I've always smelled this strongly, and the ridiculous fragrance you're wearing that's like 90% chemicals, that's awful to me. That's fine that you like that, but this is a public area. And yeah, the amount of times that people were just like, I do not care that that's affecting you, because what they were understanding was that I prefer not to smell this smell. They did not understand this is dysregulating my nervous system by excessive overstimulation. They just thought, he does not want it, and he is not entitled to demand what he wants. That's a further thing too, because there's this idea from people my age. There was a book when I was little called If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. And the point of this book was that if you give that mouse a cookie, you're going to need to keep feeding the mice forever. So you don't give them food, or else you're going to have a colony of mice to support, right? And people do treat autism this way. So they think, if I relent and I give in to his demand, he will never stop making demands, which is crazy in the context of autism, because that's why I'm making the request. Hyperosmia is why I'm making the request. That's what motivates it. So there's nothing else to ask for besides a neutral smelling environment. There's no slippery slope. There's no danger. I just want to get back to baseline. But there's this constant pushback of like, well, then you're going to ask for 5 more things. And if 5 more people come in the room with new perfumes, yeah, I will. But if we address the smell, I'll be fine. Right? You're all fantastic. I am not going to stare into a key light for 20 minutes to talk to you guys. So yeah, I'm wearing these. And I wear these inside a lot, particularly overhead lights in these spaces where there's just sound bouncing off of every surface. I can't distinguish between any of it, so I need to listen to it all simultaneously. The light is just like awful fluorescent tube things that are like crackling, and this is terrible. This is awful. I hate this. And that's another thing that people interpreted as being an emotional demand, where I was just saying, I want the lights off because I'm in charge. And that was not the problem. It's that they fucking hurt my eyes. But people were saying, no, if we relent and we turn off the light, he'll never stop demanding. But again, photosensitivity is what is motivating my need there. And if we address the light, that's the end of my concerns. So it's not this if you give a mouse a cookie thing. This is bad psychology. This is remedial, terrible psychology. So as I mentioned, I hear all of it, right? So when I go out to play Magic and I'm in the game shop, I do not hear just my friends. I have to keep a headphone over this one and listen out the side my friends are on, because I hear every pod's entire everything the whole time, and literally picking through it in my mind is what's exhausting about that experience. You can, if you slam caffeine, you can just kind of sit there and take it all in, and that also kind of sucks, because that's slamming a bunch of caffeine so you can like cope with the situation. But yeah, it's the what is fatiguing about that is literally needing to pick through and just be like, okay, the guy behind me is talking about the Locust God for the 14th time tonight. I have not played anyone playing that card, but I've heard it 14 times and I can't stop thinking about it now, right? That's actually, it's difficult in that environment to just narrow yourself down and say, I am playing with my group and I need to not hear everything I'm hearing. I was a child who wouldn't eat cake. It would literally make the underside of my tongue salivate. It was disgusting. The amount of sugar in that, I could not stand. Way, way too much. And so as a child, like a little child, they'd be like, I'd be at a birthday party and they'd be like, do you want cake? And I would just be like, nope. Straight up, no thank you. I don't want that. That is disgusting to me and I hate it. And so I also did that when I was little, where I would just literally eat completely unseasoned food. Hot dog with nothing on it, waffle with nothing on it, because I wanted to kind of access that base flavor. And anytime I tried to augment it, there might be this completely unpredictable thing that smells so strongly. It's the only thing I can taste the entire time. All right, this one's funny. Until I was like maybe 10 years old, rubber Halloween masks scared the hell out of me. I could not stand to be near them. And what I remember about it was touching it and the texture just being like, this feels like somebody has the skin taken off their body. It was the most revolting fucking thing I'd ever touched. And I was afraid of those objects for a long time. So there's reels now. And in particular, this one is about autism in Black culture. And the joke is, the guy says, she ain't no autistic. She just has to pet the carpet for 6 hours and she's afraid of yellow. Yeah, I was scared. So scared of those fucking things. And I finally got my dad to like bring me to a store, and I took like 25 minutes to like, we moved one to a different aisle, and I'd like work up the courage to walk up to it and touch it and be like, God, I hate this thing. And it was like, that was hard. I was scared of those things for real. It's because their texture made no sense. That shouldn't exist. Behaviors versus routines. So in the behavior section, we're going to cover these individual behaviors specific to autism, and then routines is going to talk about larger patterns across time. So my behaviors, I often need context to understand specifics. You can't just kind of like fire things at me with no scenery and I just put them together because I know like what you're thinking, but when I ask for clarity, that is the fight starter in my life. The idea that I would need more information to understand is a deeply offensive thing to people, and it angers them and they hate it. I don't know why, but they fucking hate it. Another behavior of mine is entering a state of thought called monotropism, which is a deep kind of focus, which for me is often wordless, and the need to communicate in language feels... it's hard to get back over there, because in music, I'm often thinking in shapes, and I'm just... So for example, the outline of a major scale on an electric guitar, if you outline that shape and then rotate it 180 degrees, that then becomes the outline of a minor scale, right? So there's a lot of ways that you can geometrically orient musical structures in your mind, and I get into that state, and then someone walks in and starts talking to me, and I just look at them and I'm like, the assumption that I'm just going to meet you in the English language right now when I was over there, that's not reasonable. And so this was seen as me just like, oh, he's working on his music. He's going to ignore you. He's so self-important. And she said, no, I can't just constantly jump back between shape thought and language thought and back to shape thought and then just go back to language thought anytime you need to yell at me, right? As I mentioned, issues of logic can be analogized by shapes in your mind, or issues of music can be analogized by these shapes in your mind. And that's just a really common way that I deal with thinking about structures, I guess. Another behavior of mine is that I can't regulate body temperature in the ways that others can. So I see people go outside in the summer, get a little bit hot, and they come inside and they cool down. And it's like 10 minutes and they're fine. I will stay hot for like the next 90 minutes, and it's horrible and it doesn't pass. And people literally just made fun of me. They didn't care. They didn't believe that was happening to me. And they just said, no, you're weak. They literally told me, you are a wimp. You are a weak person. And I'm like, okay. That's not what the problem was, though. My body was not cooling down like theirs were. So, yeah, I also have alexithymia. And what that is like, I know how I am going to feel about something, but the feeling has not inhabited me yet. Somebody dies or something, I know that I'm going to be devastated or sad, but I also know that I am not currently devastated. There's a gap where I know it's coming, but it hasn't arrived yet. And when it does arrive, could be a couple days later, and then I want to talk about it, people would always see that as either coldness of just like not caring, or they would just think, this guy is so devoted to grudge holding, I can't believe it. Like that's how I got treated, right? Because it was just take me a while to figure out what had happened and how I felt about it. And when I went to go talk about it, they were like, I can't believe you would dredge up this ancient history. And I'm like, no, this is the first time it felt for me. But again, people didn't believe that was happening to me and didn't care when I said it. Body signals is another one for me. I don't know that I need to use the bathroom, or I don't know that I'm very hungry until I'm like, why am I super cold? Oh, you need to eat food. Yeah, because it doesn't feel like anything. And so people would, I don't know, just point it out or mock it or whatever. And it's just that it doesn't, there's nothing in my body that's grabbing my attention. Like, hey, you should eat. It's time to eat. You should eat. I don't have that. This is very common for autistic people, but I speak out scenarios to try to figure out what like an appropriate response would be. And this is the normal scripting that autistics do, right? But I've literally had people say that they were surveilling me. They were watching me when I didn't know they were watching me. And they felt unsafe because I was scripting, because they thought that it was violence in some form, which doesn't even make sense to me. Yeah, you can't try to work out what you need to figure out socially without somebody taking it as a personal attack. So that's another thing that would lead us to masking, right? Is learning that you've been being monitored and they deeply disapprove of what they saw. I have watched season 7 of The Simpsons more times than probably you've done anything. Except if you're a person who has practiced the piano every afternoon for your whole life. Like that's the kind of level of Simpsons watching I'm talking about. That is on right now. I leave the Disney live stream on. It chronologically goes through all the Simpsons, and that is what I want. That's my favorite. That's what I like. Yep, every show that's not these shows, I don't care about. It's cool that the zombie show came out and everybody's really pumped about it, but oh my God, I don't care about that because Homer Simpson is not in it. So enjoy your shit. Stop talking to me about it. Related to food, though, I do also have ARFID, so avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. So I technically have disordered eating. And it is really related to the sensitive taste and smell thing, right? That's why I get in that loop of the consistent expectation, the consistent result, and the comfort of that regularity. But it does turn off eventually. I had a while where it was bagels, and then suddenly that was over. It was no longer bagel time anymore. I did not decide that. My body let me know this is the only thing that you wanted every morning for the last 8 months. Now you're done. And that too is something that was seen as excessive control or inappropriate demands, because I was just like, I don't want to eat this stuff. I want to eat just like what I want to eat, please. So those were behaviors, and it doesn't literally mean, like ways that you swing your arms, right? It's referring to a lot of the things that are happening inside me, including psychologically, physiologically. When those behaviors pile up over time, we get routines, right? So walking a common path is one of the most effective forms of emotional regulation available to me. This is also frustrating because if somebody sees you walking behind the business at like 3 a.m. because you're an autistic person, they assume that you are doing crime, and that is deeply annoying and deeply frustrating. And you just come across like people doing nonsense, and they don't expect to be snuck up on while they're like fooling around in a dumpster. And then you like surprise the dumpster people, and you're just like, I'm just trying to walk. So it's a nice thing to do, but it is also kind of obnoxiously vulnerable to do. So this portion is more about how I wanted my family to understand my orientation towards them, because I didn't know why I needed what I needed, and I didn't know why those needs were valid. And so I spent a long time in my life just acting like, that's okay. If I'm autistic near you, you can get as angry as that makes you. You can retaliate. You can punish. I'm so sorry for having autism close to you, and I don't tolerate this shit at all anymore. If I am going to be autistic near you and your response is that you're going to hurt me, I will fight you on the spot. And part of this was to explain that to them, that I get that in the past you didn't know why getting really angry at me for that trait was inappropriate. But now that we do have that knowledge, don't you ever try to do that to me again. Autistic traits are okay. Autistic behaviors are okay. We're not negotiating. We're not fighting them. We're not judging them. It's okay to exist. I had to reiterate this part because I wanted them to think about that. Think about the idea that things I couldn't change about myself is what had offended them. And I wanted to make the distinction between, why are you all so upset by my presence? Am I a bad person and that's why everyone's so difficult? Never robbed anybody. Never stole anything. Never hurt anybody. Never killed anybody. Lifelong friends. And so what I noticed is that the complaints that my family members had about me were just them saying, I can't stand that autistic trait of yours. Stop doing it. So as I said before, now that we know that, I don't accept that. I don't accept that an autistic trait pisses you off. The fact that it pisses you off pisses me off, and that's exactly as valid as your claim, so address mine first. Easy as that. It's nonsense. This is just manipulation targeting autistic people, right? People would say, yeah, word choice makes them arrogant. I apparently choose big words, the big, and you're not supposed to do big. You can't do big. Controlling women because I wanted to not have lights on in the house at night and stuff because they bugged me. So that was read as he's just controlling. He's just demanding this control. I'm like, no, it's not that. Aggression, right? Because of the way I don't. Well, you've heard the way I've been speaking this whole time. I'm not here to make sure that this dish is exactly what you ordered because I'm not the fucking waiter. And that's how I'm treated in so many venues in my life. And these were just ways that ignorant people were perceiving me and then judging me. But the interesting part is that I was not able to overturn those judgments. Although clinically my family doesn't have deficits, like I have deficits, right? They did truly lack cognitive empathy for me, and they did lack affective empathy for me. And so I'm being told how much I have deficits when all of the people around me are profoundly unempathetic. Right? So cognitive empathy, this is something that I had in there originally to explain to them. That's when we understand what is motivating someone. Right? Other people's claims about my motivations were accepted over my own. I couldn't tell anyone if I said, no, I don't want to turn the lights off so that I can exercise dominion over females. The light kind of bugs me. And what would happen is that would be debated. Right? So I don't get to explain what my motivation is. You get to tell me what my motivation is. And if I tell you that's not my motivation, you get to correct me. That's something that was happening to me because I was autistic. And that's why I've taken the attitude that I have, in a lot of this presentation, is because that's how I was being treated. Affective empathy as well. That's when we see what someone is feeling. And so they would see my face and just think, this person has such a disgusting surplus of rage. I will not even deal with them until they are not filled with rage. And it's just me, like with my face, like, and they're like, I've never seen an angrier person. Okay. And again, when I explained, I'm not angry, my face just doesn't emote like that. They didn't say, oh, I didn't understand. They correct you. And they say, no, you are angry. They just get to tell you. They literally correct you about your own inner world to your face. Right? And that's something that was also happening to me because I'm autistic. I don't have the social capital to push back on an allistic person who is bulldozing me in that way. All I can do is just repeat, I wasn't angry though, and then they will just correct me and say, yes, you were. This is a personal one. You don't have to agree with this, but this is my stance on this. Do I have Asperger's? Fuck no. You know why? Because that's the label for the kids who didn't die. Think about that. The ones that were the Asperger's children survived National Socialist Germany. So the autistic children who were not Asperger's children were fucking killed. Right? I don't fucking like that. That's not Schindler. That's different. For every child who didn't happen to get like high math skills, Asperger is the name of the doctor who said that child is appropriate to terminate. It's fine to kill that one. Asperger's meant you get to live, not Asperger's meant that one is okay to end. And those ended children were autistic like me, but they struggled in different ways, right? We say that autistic people have spiky profiles. If my profile had been cranked 15 degrees to the right, I'd be one of them too, right? So to respect what happened to them, I have ASD level 1. I don't have Asperger's. Other autistics are my brothers and sisters. They, when I interact with them, all of the stuff that I talked about, people like correcting me, treating me terribly, other autistic people don't do that to me. And I feel an obligation based on the respect that they have shown me to show that respect back to them and not look the other way about what Asperger means. That's the way that I show them the respect that they've shown me. If you still want to use that term, nobody's going to stop you. But I am going to notice. This is the one that really trips my family up. If autism is when you don't understand these social things, can't you just learn it? Couldn't you just explain to me how to do the social function? And then I could do it, right? That's a weird question, because if there was a way to bring a disabled person up or someone with a deficit, to bring them up to parity with everyone else, are they still disabled is functionally what this question is asking. They have a disability when compared at baseline levels with the rest of the people, but if we did some kind of augmentation to bring them up to parity, is the disability still relevant? Yes. Yes is the answer, for an interesting reason. And it's because I allowed a little misinterpretation of autism. It's not when you don't understand the social situations. It's when you have nothing, no mechanism alerts you to when to behave in a social way. That's really what autism is like, for me at least. The way that I say it is that I don't feel a cue moment. So telling me how to respond to a situation is a perfectly coherent logical structure. But how would I ever know when to apply it? Because I can't feel it. So the only thing I can do is metacognize and try to apply it top down after I've identified it, which is not what the autistic people around me are doing. And I think if I'm going to be more like them, I shouldn't affect an additional mental process to try and backfill information. That's going to make me less like them because none of them are doing that. So when I answered yes, I was explicitly answering the question, are they disabled anymore? Yes, they are still disabled, right? And the reason is because it's not an issue of understanding. You can't just give them the information and then they do it, because there's still the missing mechanism of when do I do that, though? I get that when you ask me about my dog, I'm supposed to ask you about your dog, but is that after I tell you about my dog? And how much do I tell you about my dog? And that's something that tripped my family up for a while, because they thought that, well, if they could explain these things to me, then I could just apply them and do them. But I think that would mean that I'm not autistic, right? If that was possible for me to just learn it, then I think I would not have the deficit that is what makes me autistic. So because I'm autistic, yes, I'm still disabled, right? That's basically the whole thing. We discussed what autism is, how to define it, some reasons around why we use certain terms, why they're important to me. We discussed what masking is, why it's harmful medically, why it's harmful morally, why it occurs. And then we talked about autism specifically for me, right? The thing that I wanted to leave my family with, you need to learn from me how to support me. And it's a very normal holistic thing to just have a top level concept and just apply it downward. Normal. But that is fucking the wrong tool for this job. That is the wrong approach here. Because the only person who actually has the information about how to support me is me. So if I'm telling you I need the light off and you say, no, you don't, you're not learning from me. Because I am telling you clearly what I need. And you're just fighting it. That's why I phrased it like I did about being judgmental about autistic traits and needs, because that's really what I experienced, was just a strong pushback because they didn't know why I needed it. And they also didn't care. There was no curiosity. They had their answer. They knew it because they decided it, and they're telling me that's the way it is. And the last thing I wanted to tell them was to explicitly call out that the way that I was being treated was abusive. because it was constantly taking advantage of my social deficits. For example, any kind of verbal dispute, they're constantly changing subject. They're changing their role within the conversation. So they start giving you, instead of answering a question, they'll just start giving high level insights that have nothing to do with it. And those things I couldn't recover from as an autistic person. If you do that to me while I'm speaking, I'm out of luck, man. That's what my disability is that when you mess with me verbally like that, I can't really get my way out of it. But I do have fists. And so what I wanted to tell them was that if what my life is going to be like from now on is that I'm going to have autistic traits wherever I want to have them. And if when you see that you want to hurt me, I will hurt you back. Fair. I'm going to exist. And if your stance is that I'm not allowed to exist without suffering, you're my enemy. So, all that said, that's what it's like being autistic for me. What I think you should do is listen to James Brown, listen to ODB, and rip down a flock camera.